So what's the silliest thing you did as a teenager to rebel? Like, I'm not talking like setting fire to an orphanage kind of style thing, but just, what's the silliest thing, the daftest thing?
The list goes on and on and on. I think one of the most memorable ones was stealing a tugboat.
I I don't know how to react to that.
You don't have to. And I would do it again.
Wow, wow. Okay, well,
What about you? Did you part your hair a different way one day?
yeah,
Did you
but that was because my parents thought it'd look nice. No, I was the anti-rebel. I was much to my younger sister's annoyance. I could get away with anything because I was the good child. Well, I behaved, but then I didn't abuse that power.
You didn't there's no silly nonsense that you did?
I mean, probably. Oh, no, no. I was an absolute square when I was a teenager. We've left each other speechless for this introduction.
Yeah. Yeah,
But what?
I was just gonna say I think I may have stolen it from you. I doubled down, on your behalf because aside from the tugboat, which I'm pretty sure in the same week was also the week that we tried to build a sweat lodge to hallucinate legally, and that's using your noggin.
Welcome to In Orbit every Wednesday, athletes.
Get 2000 AD now. Get.
I have a hard time picturing you as a teenager, Mike. I just assume that you have always been the tallest man in the world with your quiff and the tash and just have always been that guy. Especially when you and I asked you if you would come on my podcast to talk about Ken Russell's The Devils, and you were like, "Oh, I've been trying to read The Devils of Loudun since I was 16." And I'm like, "Who the fuck are you?"
A very odd little boy. Not even little. I was 6'4" by the time I was 13. But no, I was just very pale and thin and awkward, and nothing has really changed other than the thin bit. Um,
I
yeah.
stopped growing by the time I was 13. I'm barely 5'2".
Yeah. No,
So,
I topped out at 13, but at 6'4".
God, life is unfair. We're polar opposites in so many ways, Mike. It works out
Mm,
great. It's
very much
really
so.
remarkable.
Do you know
But
what? Do you know what? Should we leave this bit in the podcast?
yeah,
Okay, great.
yes,
All right.
absolutely.
So
Why
so
why would we
for
not?
for Vorag Thungerflitz. That was just us chatting away when normally there's credits playing and stuff. Yeah, welcome to In Orbit every Wednesday. I'm Molch-R, and this is KLO-E, and you now know a little bit more about us than you did before. So welcome to the show. This week we are talking teenage rebellion. That's what all this blathering on about being teenagers. Rebellion, something I absolutely did not indulge in any way, shape, or form other than I like going to the pub when I was 15 or something like that.
Ooh.
And very awkwardly ordering drinks, and they let me get away with it. Anyway,
It's because
uh,
you were 6'4".
exactly, exactly. The beard and the mustache did not materialize until many years later, thank God. But we're talking about that because in discussion we were like, well, there's 2080's always had this rebellious spirit, and that's been embodied in certain characters who are very well known in 2080. So we wanted to explore those, how the representation of kind of like teenage rebellion and teenagers has changed in the prog over the years. And remember, we're doing a Q&A episode.
Send us everything.
So we need your questions, he said, pointing right at the camera. Thrillcast at 2000ad.com. Thrillcast, that's all one word. Thrillcast at 2000ad.com. Or leave it in the comments underneath this video on socials and YouTube, or message, skeet us, or whatever they Blue Sky call it. Chloe is at Punk Rock Mom Jeans.
Yeah.
But rock is just with a K and mom is spelt incorrectly. And I'm at Molch-R, Molcher. But yes, Teenage Rebellion and 2000 AD, which kind of, I mean, it's baked into it,
Goes
really, isn't it?
hand in hand.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, a point you made when we were off camera is it's in its DNA. Because of course the progenitor of 2000 AD, well the predecessor, let's put it that way, was Action, which was the banned comic from 1976 that included, most famously Kids Rule OK.
Yeah, aggro is a way of life.
Yeah, which in of itself, I when I was doing the research for my book, I reread all of the kind of pre-ban
Mhm.
Israel. Okay, how on earth? I mean, this is me just revealing myself to be a massive square. How on earth did that ever get published? Like, it shouldn't be published now. Never mind in the 1970s, for God's sake.
I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of stuff that came out in the '70s, whether it's comics, movies, everything that really just should not, and would never now. But like, I love Kids Rule OK.
Oh yeah,
Like,
it's amazing, but it's really violent.
no, it's exceptionally violent, but
Yeah.
I don't know. That's it's kind of part of the appeal. Like it is one of those things about '70s comics where they did not care. It was like, this is the story that we're gonna tell, and we're gonna tell it exactly how we wanna tell it, and that's a perfect example. But also, I feel like that, like, weird, aggression,
Mm,
that aggro is, uh is very on par, at least for a lot of people, with like the adolescent and teen experience
yeah.
in a way. I mean, taken to an extreme, obviously, but like it's kind of fun in that way. And it's a great book to look back on for that exact reason.
And I think it's one of those things that in many ways, kids need catharsis because to be all teenage about it, the world is unfair, and a lot of things don't make any sense. And actually having media that allows you to indulge in a desire to just smash things up and move on and be something else and do your own thing, is absolutely perfect. Um, And what's interesting in terms of the evolution from Action into 2000 AD is that, 2000 AD didn't necessarily have any less violence in it. But
Oh, violence.
as Pat Mills, creator of 2000 AD, and many others have commented, um, rather than it being teachers and policemen and, figures of real authority, it was aliens and,
Yeah,
cyborgs and
they were
things like that.
stand-ins.
So to a degree, would you agree that the 2000 AD is kind of hidden that teenage rebellion a little bit by making it genre, by making it sci-fi? It's kind of just it's wacky rather than necessarily threatening.
No, because I think that there is a lot of aggro. There is a lot of violence in a lot of 2000 AD, especially older 2000 AD strips.
Mm.
But I would argue, you ready for this one? I would
Uh,
argue that using stand-ins for the usual teenage oppressors, teachers, parents, etc., creating more of a stand-in metaphor for that, or symbol of that, through aliens and monsters and robots, etc. Um, I think it's better at teaching media literacy. I think that it actually makes it so that, um, because 2000 AD it's an all ages, comic
Mm.
in the sense that, like, most people start reading it in their teens, and so when you pick that up and you're reading it, it's not force-fed to you that, like, "See, your parents suck, your teachers suck." Like, we understand. It's a, here's a representative. You get to apply whoever you want to that, because regardless of what that might be a stand-in for you for, as a teenager, you all automatically have people that you see as these, like, beat 'em down authoritarian figures, because that's just the experience of teenagedom.
I mean, the most obvious examples of teen rebellion are DR and Quinch. Now, I will admit, when I first read them, I didn't pick up on the teen thing.
You didn't, really?
No. No, no, no. Even though obviously it says it several times in the strip, I because it's riffing off a kind of like the 1950s kind of James Dean, but
Mhm.
silly and wacky and crazy and violent. I just didn't. My media literacy was very poor, so I just didn't pick up on that at all. I just thought they were two
Irony of that.
weird aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to I showed this to you earlier, but I do have to show this off. But, like,
Explain for those who are listening.
oh, it's the 2000 AD special edition. Look how beautiful it is.
From
Boy.
which year was that?
This was I'm gonna have to look now. Sorry, everybody.
It's all right. I'm looking.
Uh, 1993 is this one.
1993. So
1993.
back when I was actually a teenager,
Yeah,
just.
back when back when I was a young child. But yeah, DR and Quinch, the Agony Aunt stuff was always some of my favorites. But, like, DR and Quinch is kinda like, I always picked up on the teen thing, 'cause
Right.
maybe it was because, like, they were little, like, they kinda little punk shitheads, and I was also a little punk shithead when I was a teenager, and so I immediately got that and latched onto it, especially because it was a funny strip. And I they're my favorite teens in the 2000 AD continuity, um, simply because, like, that was Alan having fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that was, and it was, like, uh I've gone off before many times about how funny, I think people forget just how funny Alan Moore is. And he's incredibly funny, and so many of his older strips, before the Great Migration to US comics, were impossibly funny, and the way he writes teenagers is spot on to me. I always it's they're so funny and they're goofy, and for the time they were, pretty prescient. There's ones where, you know, they're driving around space and there's beer bottles falling out of their spaceship, or they're trying to dodge the draft. And it's all things that still kind of work. It's the no, I mean, DR stands for diminished responsibility. It's it's the perfect teen strip, and I do think that anybody who is, oh god, can you imagine? Anybody who's a teenager who's listening to this podcast, please, please go and read DR and Quinch. See yourself, look in the mirror.
But it kind of stands as like this exemplar, really. And whenever there's well, that and another character that we're about to discuss, and I think sometimes, particularly as the comic has aged with its readership and its its primary readership has gotten older,
Mhm.
um, it's more difficult to do teenage stuff because
Yeah.
inevitably you go from being the teenager doing being shouted at to being the adult who's doing the shouting.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
not
the
speaking from first experience, but I definitely am.
I mean, the the, um, the well, it's funny because like, I have a kid who is about to be a teenager, and I yo, whew, right? Terrifying,
Don't like.
and I'm like, "Now hold on. Am I becoming that person? Slowly but surely." The it's, um they're all cautionary tales in a way because I know that when we kind of were discussing what we wanted to bring into this, Chopper was definitely, high up on the list because I feel like discussing DR and Quinch and discussing Chopper are almost great parallels because they're both technically cautionary tales, but from a completely different perspective.
Yes, and it's two views of being a teenager from two separate writers who,
Very
one
different
is
writers.
acknowledged. Well, one of them is acknowledged as being one of the greatest comic book writers of all time. The other one does not get the due that he deserved. Well,
No
neither
kidding.
John Wagner and Alan Grant get the due that they thoroughly deserve.
That's another episode.
Well, quite. Um, and they're different views of teenagedom and rebellion meaning different things. Now,
Mhm,
what I find fascinating about Chopper is his journey. Because he started off, it was a phase of Judge Dredd where it was lots of just one episode, two episode, slice of life of the city kind of stories. And at the time, um, graffiti had come to Britain. It's weird to think that there was a time when graffiti as an art form um, didn't really exist in this country, but you'd started getting newspaper features about the great kind of Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York
mhm.
graffiti artists, um, and so in that first story. He's a graffiti artist, and he's the greatest graffiti artist. He's this spotty oik in a leather jacket with chains on, a
Yep.
Ron Smith special.
He
Um,
was just a little surf punk.
Yeah, and he's up against this rival, and you realize spoilers that his rival is a robot who is himself a metaphor for teenage rebellion. And you've got Chopper's amazing parents. His both of them jobless. His mum spends time washing up dirtying plates and then washing them up again, and his dad practices headbutting eggs into a bucket. Like, is there a more perfect mockery of the seemingly pointlessness of being an adult than that? It's
It
incredible.
it it really does feel like a little too on the nose, almost. Like, it reads completely differently depending on what age you are
Mm,
reading
mm.
it. Like, if you're a little bit younger, then, like, seeing that, you're like, "That's very silly," and then you get into your late 30s, and then you read it and you go,
And you
"Oh, no,
realize,
am I headbutting eggs into a bucket?"
am I just constantly doing the washing up? Yes.
I am
Yes, you are.
yes.
Yeah.
That's all
Always.
adulthood is washing
Yeah.
dishes, doing laundry. But, like, it's yeah, it's funny, but
Mm.
in a way that's kind of dark,
Well, it's
which,
darkly funny. I mean, that was John and Alan, all over,
I mean,
wasn't it?
in general, across the entire
Yeah.
oeuvre. But
But but then, of course, when they bring him back, he's a sky surfer. He
mhm,
is a teenage delinquent. He's spent time in the cubes. He's keeping his nose clean. But I watched Clockwork Orange recently, and that first episode of Midnight Surfer, which is the story in which uh, Chopper returns, or first episode, second episode, where he's helping out. He's teaching other kids, like in a structured session. He's teaching other kids how to sky surf. But in
yeah.
Dread's like, "Oh, you're keeping your nose clean." Yes, no, I'm so. And they both know that he's lying. And he goes home to his parents, and they're exactly the same. and it did have that real feel for me as that kind of Kubrick-like, when Alex goes home and his parents just emotionally constipated
Yeah.
nobodies that he
Yep.
just can't relate to in any way, shape, or form. Um, but sky surfing in particular is such an incredible expression of individuality
Mhm.
because surfing in America, particularly kind of the West Coast surfing, and with films like what's it called, Big Wednesday, was it Big Thursday?
You're gonna have to look.
Big Wednesday.
Big Wednesday.
Which was written by, co-written by John Milius, who was the co-writer on some of the Dirty Harry films. And that's all about, it's like a coming of age story in the surfing community
Mhm.
around Malibu, which at the time was, when he was growing up, was very much a kind of countercultural um,
Movement?
movement. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and the focus is on individual skill and
Yeah.
teenage rebellion as not necessarily fighting but escaping.
Yeah.
And so Chopper has gone from somebody who is fruitlessly trying to forge his own identity, and he keeps it despite everything. And
Mhm.
then he becomes this individual, and with this expression of freedom that he has in sky surfing, he competes in Super Surf 7 and all this and the other. And that's a great transition for that character
Yeah.
that
Well,
you wouldn't have seen coming.
well, it's it's a transition for the character that makes sense, and it also probably makes sense to a lot of the younger readership reading it
Mm.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's I mean, the concept of teenagers wasn't a thing. I can't remember exactly what year it was. It was maybe the l early '60s?
Oh, no, it's the
Late
1950s. That's when was it John Savage? Is that who I'm thinking of? I can't remember. Anyway, yeah, it's a modern phenomena. Is the notion of the teenager?
Exactly, and that seems incredibly bizarre because it really was here are young people who are learning that you can both you can be an individual, that
Mm,
you can find these outlets to express yourself, um, and still the risk that they thought wouldn't happen, but of course did, is that you can express and explore that individuality at that age. It's the prime time to do so, and you can still grow up to be like a productive, intelligent member of society, which
mm.
like the whole risk was like, well, that's never going to happen. If you step outside the norm at all, then you're not going to be an upstanding citizen. And I mean, that's what a ridiculous concept, but it's Chopper's kind of a fun example of that, where it's like the system completely and utterly screwing him and still managing to pull himself out and remain that little tidbit of what made him an individual moving forward.
And what I find fascinating is Chopper becomes a kind of rumination on the nature of aging and what it means to be an individual as you age and a rebel as you age, and not following anybody else's rules. So you end up
Yeah.
with Song of the Surfer,
Mhm.
that beautiful artwork by Colin McNeil, and Chopper remains himself.
Mhm. He's still very
Even
much
though
Chopper.
yeah, he has refused to compromise, and in a way that an awful lot of the morality tales, the traditional morality tales around teenage years and teenage rebellion are, well, if you rebel, you'll hurt yourself, or
Yeah.
you won't be able to go on to be a proper person. But with Chopper, he goes, no, 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 I'm not for that at all. You can shoot me
Yeah.
in the back if you want, as he flies away at the end of the Oz mega epic.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm going to remain. And even into the later stories, where it's Garth Ennis writing him, it's still about aging. It's still about what it means to grow up. And can you still
Yeah.
be? Did you have to compromise to be an individual? And he never does.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a rumination, as you call it, on the idea that kind of what you said earlier. It's rebellion doesn't necessarily have to be anything aggressive or violent. Sometimes rebellion can be sticking by your guns and remaining to be entirely yourself amidst everything else. And we should all really be abiding by that more, even if we're washing a dish over and over and over again.
But
Yeah.
I find it fascinating that Ken Nyman and PJ Holden with Chimpsky
Yeah.
have a different take on the teenage rebellion. So you can see it could, Chimpsky is a juvenile, is a young
Mhm.
talking ape in Mega City One. His rebellion is proper open rebellion. Well, not open,
Well,
but proper rebellion. Like he's
yeah.
fighting for power, but he's doing it not for self-aggrandizement or because he wants to just be an individual, but he's doing it for the people around him
Mhm.
and his neighborhood and his community. And I've spoken before on the show about how it does remind me of that kind of your local neighborhood Spider-Man
Yeah.
kind of thing, where a superhero is embedded in the community and protects that community. He's not off fighting in space. He's protecting that community. And so 2000 AD has evolved in its portrayal
Yeah.
of being a teenager. And you wanted to bring up Cradlegrave in this as well,
Did
didn't
wanna
you?
bring up Cradlegrave. Yeah, 'cause, honestly, it's a book that I don't feel gets enough attention, and at
Oh,
some point,
absolutely.
we're gonna go through at the end of the year towards Halloween and do more horror books, then I will go off like a rocket about it, but, like, Cradlegrave is centered around, like, a delinquent, teen,
Mm,
uh and the trauma and the horror of trying to pull oneself out of the muck,
mm,
essentially, especially in an environment and of course in a system that doesn't make that journey easy. Uh, and oh, the body horror in that though. That's one of my favorite body horror comics, I think. Just like I see, I don't wanna spoil it, though. I have to save this for another time. But, yeah, it seems like there's a lot of layering and overlapping of 2000 AD stories that essentially show teenagers who are stuck in a bad situation, stuck in a bad environment, or have to make decisions. um, their actions are very much dictated by the environment in which they've had to grow up.
mm.
So how do you shape yourself as an individual around that? How do you pull yourself out of that environment if you can? And and what horror do you meet in the process of all of that? It's just nothing but it all comes back to being a teenager is inherently incredibly traumatic.
We and with Cradlegrave, which is the John Smith and the much missed Edmund Bagwell,
R.I.P.
he the central character in that comes back from prison, and you can see so many different metaphors in this.
Mhm.
The somebody comes out of prison, goes back to their home, and their friends are addicted to drugs,
Yeah,
and
it's all
they've
you're
escaped
coming back
that.
you're having to come back to the environment that made you have to make those decisions in the first place, and how do you not make those decisions and get sent back into a system that's still gonna fuck you? It's it's
Yeah.
it's that over and over again, and that's the truth for, unfortunately, a whole lot of people. Um
And what I think links all of these teenage rebels in 2000 AD is just this notion of showing rather than telling. teenagers to be themselves.
Yeah.
Because whether you're going to have to confront trauma, you're going to have to confront horror, you're going to have to confront a system regardless of what happens. You can't escape that, but it's how you react to that.
Yeah.
And so whether it's body horror on an English council estate, or whether it's flying off into the rad back of Judge Dredd's world, or trying to make a movie with like a Marlon Brando step in who can't talk properly, mind the oranges, Marlon. It's how do you be yourself? How do you express yourself? How do you be yourself? How do you become the person that you're going to be? I was going to start this episode with because when we decided to do it, I was like, my brain went teenage. Teens a go go. Teens a go go. What's that about? So I went and Googled. I realized I was thinking of a parody from 2000 AD from Mark Millar and Ryan Hughes's Tales from Beyond Science of Teenage Gang Debs, which is a film in the 1960s. Bear in mind, the concept of a teenager was only, 10 years, 10, 15 years old at this point.
Mhm.
They were incredibly threatening. And I just love the poster for it where it goes, they all talk, fight, and love just one way, dirty, underaged, oversexed, kick happy, thrill hungry, always reckless, and willing. And willing is in italics and bold. And I should have started the episode with that.
I'm getting that put on my headstone.
But it's fascinating, and I mean, let's not forget that when 2000 AD started, films like Scum came
Yeah.
out, which again was about the increasingly authoritarian system's reaction to the problem of teenagers.
Ugh.
And I'm very much remember it was a Nick Broomfield, an early Nick Broomfield film, a documentary called Juvenile Liaison. There we go. It's because you said a teenage delinquent earlier, and it completely threw me. But yeah, it's a film called Juvenile Liaison, which follows like a juvenile liaison officer in Blackburn, and uh, he's a fascist. He like walking around in like this long patent leather coat with
Mhm.
like the collar popped up and his hair's slicked back. And it's his job to basically put the fear of God into small children who have been caught in some misdemeanor. Like a child stole someone's crayon at school. One kid won't get up in the morning. And it's the most brutal and horrific treatment of children. Um,
I
to
remember you telling me about this because we were
Yeah,
talking about Scum.
and it's to put these kids on the straight and narrow. And of course, it doesn't bloody work. I mean, I think
No.
Bloomfield went back like years later, and aside from like one kid who'd taken their own life, the others weren't doing so well. Like there was one kid who'd turned out okay, but the rest were completely traumatized by this, and it did nothing to lift them out of the conditions that had resulted in that behavior in the first place.
Yeah.
And if anything, the violence of it had just reinforced all of that stuff. So, when you then have DR and Quinch, when you have Chopper, it's coming out of a world that is basically going, we want to get rid of teenagers. They're a problem. They're
Yeah.
always a problem. They can never be anything other than a problem unless they're completely behaving themselves.
Well, and we're gonna run out of time, but there's also of course, and I feel like this kind of fits to some of these stories as well. Is like sometimes teenagers are the reason why other teenagers can't find that individuality, and that uh, honestly very normal nature to rebel. Like you're mentioning all these fantastic uh British films about teenage rebellion and authoritarianism and all of that stuff. And I just thought of If,
Mhm.
the Lindsay Anderson movie where it's, you get Malcolm could absolutely still get it, McDowell, uh, who like really is he's at the school where it's completely, everything's uniform, and he is the one sort of person who's sparking this little bit of individuality, and it's not even necessarily the school that uh keeps him repressed and oppressed. It's the other teens. So
Mm,
it's either way, no matter what way you turn, there is somebody who is going to be so stuck in their ways and in this single track that you're going to find yourself pushed back into the fold. And it's the moral of all of this, and the moral of all of the comics, is that, like, it sucks. It sucks to be that young. It just does, and it's okay for it to suck, because if you keep being the most authentic version of yourself and exploring what that means, then you're going to come out of it on the other end a decent person, regardless of what that looks like.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes it'll involve time travel and thermonuclear weapons.
And spaceships,
And
and, Quinch's giant mother.
on those words, bring this episode of In Orbit Every Wednesday to a close, which I do feel like this show needs to be called In Orbit Every Wednesday, we're running out of time.
Yeah, it's the catchphrase.
Because we're still over time. But that's fine. I love this. This was great.
I think so too, and I also, like, thank you to everybody who keeps thinking that I'm so young in the comments.
She is a
It
mother, Earthlets.
it's fueling me, it's telling me that my skin routine is working. From 2 middle-aged people who are very excited to be here.
But my back. Yes. So we should see you in 7 days' time, Earthlets. When you know what, I think we should talk about the prog because we've got
Yeah,
a few.
we're gonna have to.
Yeah.
We're gonna have
But
to. We're having we're
well,
having
it makes
we're going off on too many tangents. We have to
going
rein back
off
in.
piece to the point where there's no mountain left, I think. But yes, do submit questions for our Q&A episode, which will be coming up in the future. Thrillcast at 2000ad.com, or message us on social, or leave a comment under this video on YouTube. We'll be back in a week's time. This has been KLO-E. I've been Molch-R. This has been In Orbit Every Wednesday, and we'll definitely keep to half an hour next time, Earthlets. Or maybe we'll rebel.
Ugh. Too tired for that. I have to go wash a dish now.
One
See
big
you next
birthday, Earthlets.
week.
Get 2000 AD now. Get.
Well, thanks for joining us on In Orbit Every Wednesday, Earthlets. Make sure you like and subscribe, and go along to 2000 AD, where you'll be able to subscribe to 2000 AD and the Judge Dredd magazine. Sign up to our newsletter, and you'll get hundreds of pages of free comics to download. And download the app for your Apple and Android devices. Now, don't forget, Earthlets, this is the 2000 AD universe. We just live in it.